Hi there! This is my video on strong verbs. This video, a mini lesson, will help you improve your writing by using stronger verbs. First, a brief review about verbs. There are two kinds of verbs. There's a state of being. Those verbs only show existence. And then there are action verbs. Those verbs show both physical and mental action. We're going to talk a lot more about action verbs, but first a little about state of being. There are only a few state of being verbs. And as I said before, they only show existence, that something is. And that's where we start. Is, are, was, were, am, been, and being. That's pretty much it. But then there are action verbs. Often people mistake this idea. Yes, there are action verbs that show action. If you jump, if you run, if you play, if you walk, if you hike, those are all action verbs. But action verbs also show mental action, like wondering, thinking, meditating. Those may not seem like very active things, but your mind is still active. So they're considered action verbs as well. And then we go from action verbs to looking more closely at which action verbs are actually strong verbs. In order to look more closely at strong verbs, we're going to look at them in a passage from the Chocolate War. On the third play, he was hit simultaneously by three of them. One his knees, another his stomach, a third his head. The helmet no protection at all. His body seemed to telescope into itself, but all the parts didn't fit, and he was stunned by the knowledge that pain isn't just one thing, it is cunning and various, sharp here and sickening there, burning here and clawing there. He clutched himself as he hit the ground. The ball squirted away. His breath went away like the ball. A terrible stillness pervaded him. And then, at the onset of panic, his breath came back again. His lips sprayed wetness, and he was grateful for the sweet, cool air that filled his lungs. But when he tried to get up, his body mutinied against movement. He decided the hell with it. He'd go to sleep right here, right out on the 50-yard line. The hell with trying out for the team. Screw everything. He was going to sleep. He didn't care anymore. Renaud! The coach's voice scraped like sandpaper against his ears. He opened his eyes flutteringly. "I'm all right," he said to no one in particular, or to his father maybe, or the coach. He was unwilling to abandon this lovely lassitude, but he had to, of course. He was sorry to leave the earth, and he was vaguely curious about how he was going to get up, with both legs smashed and his skull battered in. He was astonished to find himself on his feet, intact, bobbing like one of those toy novelties dangling from car windows, but erect. Robert Cormier is the author of this piece, and he did a great job with strong verbs in this section, so we're going to look a little more closely at them. I'm going to circle a few of them, and I'm also going to talk about things that might be confused with strong verbs. That's just great descriptive writing. So, we can look at some of the verbs. Actually, I think what I'll do is go through and underline all the verbs. And some of these are the verbs of the sentence, and some of these are verbs used in other ways. For example, to telescope is an infinitive, but there's a verb in there, so it's still a strong verb. So I'm going to circle some of the strong verbs like stunned, clutched, the ball squirted away. This burning and clawing, these are participles, so they're part verb, part adjective, but they are still, nonetheless, verbs. Pervaded is a really nice strong verb. Sprayed is a nice strong verb. Filled. And so you see there are some verbs, however, like decided, it's okay. but not necessarily strong. So, screw everything, that's a nice strong verb. And then down here, his coach's voice scraped like sandpaper. Legs smashed, skull battered, those are also strong. Astonished is a nice strong verb. Bobbing, again, this is a part verb, part adjective situation. Dangling, and erect. So all of these are strong verbs. So you have a few strong verbs from the Chocolate War that we just read the passage from. And now here are some other strong verbs, just a little verb chart for you. Kind of a reference and a tool for you to use as a writer to improve whatever piece you're working on right now and to add to your strong verbs collection. Because I like to keep a sort of running collection of those strong verbs. I have like lists and lists of them, and I can go and look if I feel like I need a verb, and there they are. So here is that list for you. Take a look. So this is a piece of Secret Life of Bees. It's from page 70, and we are going to look at strong verbs in a little section of Secret Life of Bees, because you find strong verbs in all good writing, and again, you can continue to add to your collection of strong verbs by looking through your book and figuring out what strong verbs are there, and then you've got more tools for your toolbox of writing. So let's take a look at some strong verbs in this short passage. So I counted as a verb, not really a strong one, turned around, looked back, all verbs, nothing much there. Again, this is one of those state of being verbs, so not even action verb, but here is one of those half verb, half adjective participles twisted. So that's a really good one. Raised is a pretty strong verb. And then we have down in here, resemble, split up there, which is really good. Then we have glints and glimmers, ached, and there we go, and filled. Filled can be one. So the things I've circled are really considered strong verbs. And it's kind of up to you with that, but you know, it's definitely when it's different, when it doesn't get used very often, when it really causes you to see or feel or understand a situation much better. Those are all strong verbs. Then comes the hard part, actually looking at your own writing and figuring out where the verbs are, if they're strong, if they're not, changing them. So I'm going to look at a piece of my own writing. This is the first paragraph of Dingo de Mayo. And so I'm just going to go through first and but underline the verbs. So pulled is a verb, slammed is a verb, I knew, heard, knew again, find, returned, was, state of being verb, torn apart, was failing, talked, opened. So I feel like I have at least one strong verb in here. I'm going to circle it. I think slammed is a nice strong verb. It definitely shows that action. You hear the car door, you know it's an old vehicle, so you get that noise. I'm going to leave slammed, but I've got some work to do otherwise. And my first thing I need to do is first I need to change some of my state of being verbs into action verbs. And even though knew and you are not strong verbs, I want to keep them because I had something going on here, kind of a parallel structure thing, right? So I had I knew, And also I have I never knew. So it was a little bit of a contrast using that conjunction but in the middle there. I want to keep that one. I like that one. I do want to change some things though. Instead of pulled, I'd like to say I swung. It's kind of the motion with the truck I'm thinking. I swung into the driveway, and to me that's a little stronger than pulled. I swung into the driveway and slammed the door of my old Ford. Still don't know what to do about heard. Gonna come back to that. Instead, I'm gonna kind of change some of these other things, especially my state of being verbs, the wases. So here I'm going to have to completely change the sentence to kind of get rid of that. And that's kind of how it has to happen with those state of being verbs. If you show rather than tell, so telling is kind of using state of being verbs, but showing is kind of going more to the strong verbs, then it's not just about plucking the verb out and putting another one in. It's about fundamentally changing the sentence. And so what I'm going to have to do right here is I'm going to say, I arrived to what the 7-year-old puppy, and I might put puppy in quotes because we know really puppies aren't 7, but she was still very puppyish at 7, had torn apart. So the sentence, I knew that Sugar had heard me pull up, but I never knew what I would find when I returned from school, and lately I arrived I did not arrive, is what I needed to do, to what the 7-year-old puppy had torn apart. Now we can get rid of this sentence altogether. Then I can say, instead of saying it was the worry, I can say I worried, and I think worried is a strong verb. I worried about my older rescue dog, Tingo. I'm going to probably leave he was 14 and each day brought a new way that his health was failing. For now. I may go back and even change that later. But here, talked and opened, I think could still be better. So in this last sentence, instead of just talked, I want to capture that idea of kind of baby talk like you do with pets. Like, hey, how you doing, pooches? You know, kind of hi and sweet. So I decided just to use that, kind of make a verb. So I baby talked my way in the back door. And then here, I like open. However, it needs something else. And so I think I'm just going to say, I'm going to use an adverb, right, as I slowly opened it. And I could probably find an even better adverb, but at least it's describing the verb, so it's giving the verb a little bit of help. So this is how things end up. So here are the changes I've made in my draft. Swung is a strong verb I added. Slammed I already had. We kept this structure like I talked about before because I knew, I never knew, I wanted that with the contrasting but. I didn't change returned. It's fine. You may not get all of them. I did a dramatic change to get to did arrive, which I think is a strong verb. I already had torn apart, which I think is strong. I changed it was a worry to I worried, which I think is much better structurally. I left a few state of being verbs. Not always a great idea, but sometimes it has to happen. And then I changed this verb into I baby talked, a little stronger, and then added an adverb here to opened, helps it out a good bit. So these are the changes that I made in just one paragraph. So you can see that going back to your writing over and over again to look for strong verbs and to look for descriptive language and other things really do help change your writing and make it so much better. It's great if you spend time with it. I hope you've enjoyed my lesson on strong verbs. That's it.